Please subscribe to our channel by pressing the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive updates on new videos.
Of human excellence. And today I am reminded of what Swamiji wrote to a Diwan in one of his letters to Haridas Desai. He said, if the mountain cannot come to Muhammad, Muhammad shall come to the mountain. And in this beautiful part of the city, where so many of you have been involved with technology, with multinational corporations, where I think Swamiji's ideas are needed more than ever, and his call needs to be answered with full enthusiasm and even greater education in his ideas. I am glad that this is happening. I hope this happens every year. Now, the celebration that is happening not just here in Hyderabad but all across the world, that is of Swamiji's birthday, and the theme that we have chosen for this evening with the great presence of all of you, that is Indian Ethos for Modern Management. And before I begin, I think I've seen in the last 3 years how incredibly the volunteers of Ramakrishna Mutt have carried out every activity at the Mutt. And I used to say, you put them out of the Mutt and there also they can organize things beautifully. I think they have done that. Give them a round of applause. And also, and after this, I'm going to quickly talk and finish. And also, please give it up for the young Yuva Sangharsh finalist Yashashwin for that wonderful message that he had. You know, I'm not in the habit of writing speeches. I stand up based on whatever feel I get at that point in time. I usually talk about it. And I think he gifted me with what I want to talk about. You see, when you talk about Indian Ethos for Modern Management, I'm occupying space on a stage where you have practicing stalwarts, Indian Ethos in Swami Bodhmayananji Maharaj and management in Professor Ravichandran. So I am the word in between, that is for. Indian Ethos and management have been taken care of in Indian Ethos for Management. So I was thinking of it just on a funny note, and I decided I'll talk a little bit about the for part of it. Because you see, all across the country, we prepare bright young kids for careers that sometimes parents ask them to choose, sometimes career counselors advise them to go ahead with, or sometimes our magazines or newspapers, Tom and Propel, every single day, so our kids choose different careers. Now I meet two kinds of young people in the country. Some of them want to choose the path of management so that they make a lot of money, they are rich, powerful, and influential. And then there is another half that doesn't want to touch the world of business or the field of entrepreneurship or management because they think it is very bad, it is something that has all the ill values attached, so they stay away from it. So I think both the words, Indian Ethos and management, we need to try and understand it a little better, at least from a very simple perspective that I grew up with. I know that I was introduced with a Forbes 30 under 30 tag and everything, but interestingly, I started my work at Dexterity in the year 2008. A young Barack Obama was yet to be inaugurated as the American president. Forbes did not have a list called 30 under 30, and I had no idea that what I was doing was something that falls in the category of entrepreneurship. I started out for a very simple reason. Born and brought up in small towns and villages of Bihar, I grew up without a school or a library in the neighborhood, and for the first 12 years of my life, I studied at home. But since I am speaking at a Ramakrishna Mission and Mutt platform, I think it is even more relevant. My parents had a threefold way of educating me. The first part of my education was through the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna Dev, Holy Mother Sharada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda. On the walls of small rented houses that we lived in, they pasted the quotations of Thakurma and Swamiji and of great men and women of our times and those who came before us on every single wall. And every morning when we woke up, they made it mandatory for us to read out these messages aloud. That was the first part of my education. The second part was, it was mandated that we read newspapers every day. And the third part, of course, was textbooks and notebooks would be brought home. Either our parents would teach us or we had to self-teach ourselves. So this was a threefold education that I grew up with. At the age of 12, my siblings who had to write their board exams, because of that we moved to the capital city of Bihar, the city of Patna. I saw a city for the first time and a school for the first time. I'm fast forwarding the story so that I get to the for part in a very important way, because I think that is the message that I want to leave you with today. So at the age of 12, I come to school for the first time, and all these years, I've read newspapers, stories of young men and women from all across the country, our young bright students who were winning scholarships, who were representing India at global platforms, those who were going to top colleges and universities. And I used to read about these children, and I used to wonder, can I do the same? But not enrolled in any academic institution, I could not participate in any of these competitions, could not write a single scholarship exam, and for that reason I was shut out of this entire system. So at the age of 12, I come to school, and the first thing that I do is, all these years I used to note down whatever opportunities there were, the month in which the opportunities used to take place, and who can participate. So I come to school and I start participating in all of these competitions. Fast forward that story, by the time I'm graduating high school, I'd represented India in over 6 different countries and won over 200 different competitions. Now, as many of you find it praiseworthy, the local media, parents, teachers, friends, they were all about, oh, here's this bright kid who's winning these competitions, and I was stuck in a very different dilemma. And that was, as a young kid, I would return from Japan or South Korea, and I would tell my friends stories. The flights that we took, the hotels that we stayed in, but more importantly, the questions that were asked, the ideas that were put forward at these global platforms. And I saw many a times my friends knew answers to questions that everybody missed at a global platform. Many a times my friends who came from small districts and small villages of Bihar and sat in a classroom right next to me in the city of Patna, they had brighter ideas than any idea put forward at a global platform. And I started thinking that why my friends who are as smart or even smarter, who are as hardworking, who have great ideas, why are they not at these global platforms? And trying to answer that question, I founded an organization called Dexterity with a very simple idea, that if there is an opportunity that is specially designed for our middle school and high school children, they should be the first ones to know about it. Now, some of you might think that why is that important? There is something called the NASA Space Settlement Contest. The young people who win this competition are celebrated as the next Einsteins and Newtons and Teslas. But the total number of entries that NASA has ever received for this competition is 952 from all across the world. That is barely 4 kids from like every country across the world. There are probably more kids participating in the US Sangharsh competition. So it is clearly about, it is not how talented our kids are, it is about whether or not they know about these opportunities. So Dexterity had a twofold idea. One, that if there is an opportunity, especially for our children, they should get it. The second idea was simple as well. At these global platforms where we would talk about poverty and conflict and development and struggles of young people from all across the world, or societies and communities across the world, I would a lot of times find other people at these platforms. They did not come from a background like mine. They came from world schools and international schools that are on the outskirts of our major cities that sometimes cost 3 times or 4 times the salary of even an average middle-class Indian father or mother. And I wondered if a child somewhere in this country who has actually seen her mother go an hour and a half to fetch water, will her ideas on water conservation or installing push-button taps in schools come with more lived experiences, creative solutions, firmer convictions? Will that translate into more action locally and globally? Or will it just be kids sitting in random parts trying to imagine? I'm all for it, but I felt it was important that we build leaders where we need them the most and have them the least, because we cannot continue to parachute solutions. And for that reason, I founded Dexterity. That is the work we've been doing for the last 12 years. Instead of calling ourselves an educational organization that also looks at leadership, right from 2008, we've been talking about one simple thing. Our mission statement says, we are on a mission to power the next generation of leaders through educational opportunities. And that idea of leadership, we define it very simply. It is unfortunate that many a times in our country, we limit leadership to positions. As Sir was rightly pointing out, titles, the Queen and the King, they all go in the same box. Unfortunately, when we talk about leadership in the country, we limit it to prime ministership, presidency, leadership of big major corporations, and immediately we exclude that girl child somewhere in a government school in Telangana tomorrow who will wait after school to help another girl child with 2 math problems. That child is a leader as well. We exclude a child who doesn't know very good English or very good Hindi, but knows limited Kannada or Gujarati or Telugu, and writes an application for an old mother to get a widow pension card. That child is a leader as well. And we need to fundamentally understand words better, redefine them, find their depth. Only then we can hone people who are actually leaders. And this is something that needs to start at a very young age. So that is the reason why Dexterity does that. But we also understand that leadership is not just synonymous to political leadership or bad leadership. Leadership is needed in art, in music, in sciences, in architecture and whatnot. So that is largely the work that Dexterity does. You see it, it was not the quest of becoming a CEO or landing on a list or getting invited by a president that got me started in the first place. It was a very simple idea that my friends should also have access to the same platforms, and then that we need to build leaders in those parts of India that needs leadership the most, instead of just parachuting solutions. Now, having given you a little bit of background of those of you who might just have been thinking, what does this kid actually do? That is what I do full time. That is what I've been doing for the past 12 years. I started at the age of 16, around 28 now. In the meanwhile, I got a full scholarship to study in the US and all of that, but that is secondary detail. So the reason why we are having this conversation, the two parts of it. The reason why I mentioned this story is many of us see management as something that is just limited to corporate boardrooms as we see them. Management is important. We run a platform, it's a residential program over the summer, because we feel that school has taken our children, it has taken the morning of our children, and coaching institutes have taken the evenings of our children. So we've taken summer break and winter break. Over summer break, we bring in bright young kids from all across this country into a residential program. It's called the Dexterity School of Leadership and Entrepreneurship, where we hope to build and nurture next generation problem solvers and leaders. When we talk about entrepreneurship, we tell our children three things. The first thing is money is not a bad thing. Second thing we teach them is business is a good thing. And the third thing we tell them is even change needs a business model. One of the other things we tell them is that if you're creating value, because again, there are other people who think, okay, I'm doing something that is just seva. How will I sustain it? The thing is, if you're creating value, somebody will pay for it. It will take care of itself. If Cinepolis is giving you entertainment value, you give them financial value. If a school or coaching institute is giving you knowledge value, you pay them in cash, whatever it is. So the simple idea is that businesses can be at the forefront of change, and that management, again, is not just limited to business. If all of us love our communities dearly, if we love our family dearly, if we love this country, and if we want to lift humanity up, management can be one of the greater ways of doing it. Very few of us see or reflect on the fact how printing press changed the world. We do not see car as a symbol of social transformation or social change. We love Bill Gates because he founded something called the Gates Foundation, and we forget that Microsoft also expanded human productivity and just the global economy by several $1 trillion by adding value to human lives. So the thing is, change can be great. You can be a technology enthusiast somewhere sitting in this country or in any part of the world, and you can build the next healthcare company that makes sure that people live better. You can build the next education technology company that either flips a classroom or invents a new one. You can build new gadgets and technologies, or sometimes just new models that enable us to lift more people up. So that is the reason why limiting management to something that is just an idea either of money or something that is bad, that needs to stop. Someone, as Warren Buffett rightly said one time, that money is a good way to keep score. And of course, it can keep the lights on, but my first request will be to begin to see how everything from a paperweight to a paperclip to the printing press to the printer or scanner that we have in our office rooms, how each one of those products have fundamentally changed the world and how the world needs more of it. But more importantly, there is something else we need to focus on. And there we come to the Indian ethos. Now you see, when we have a conversation about Indian ethos, it is very easy to grasp Indian ethos by bashing others. It is very easy to do that. And there is a problem with that. If the presence of a Pakistan makes you more Indian, there is a problem. If the presence of the Western world makes you a more rooted in Indian ideas, there is a problem. It needs to be deep love that you realize within. Deep love that makes you more Indian every single day, and a deep calling that you're willing to address. We don't need a bad student in order to be a good student. We need to be a good student to address a larger calling, a larger duty that we must follow. We don't need a rogue nation in order to be a better nation. We don't need an evil company in order to be a more human company. And that is something that our Indian ethos, in the first place, it should place us at the right position. Many of us complain that we have forgotten our Indian ethos. There exists no other country in this world that derives its national motto from the Mundaka Upanishad. India derives its national motto from the Mundaka Upanishad, Satyameva Jayate. Something that we conveniently ignore when we want to. Our Indian ethos start from the national motto. And they flow through. When we were celebrating the strikes in Balakot, we forgot that the Indian Air Force goes to protect our skies with the idea of Nabha Sparsha Deeptam. When our Indian Navy jumps in to protect us, they jump in with the message of Shano Varuna. Our management colleges, where sometimes we have great luminaries as Professor Ravi Chandran who bring in the Panchtantra trails to teach our kids. On the other hand, sometimes parents tell their kids, you focus on just CAT exam and IIM and package. We forget there are IIMs that have a motto that says Yoga Karmashu Kaushalam. So it is not that Indian ethos have gone away. It is that we have chosen conveniently to ignore them when we can. And when it comes to acquire them, when it comes to live up to them, then we conveniently bash the West. Then we conveniently bash a Germany or a Europe or a Japan. So that is something we need to ask ourselves. Because if we have the Indian ethos, we'll be reminded of that larger fundamental idea. That in this country, we had a Maryada Purushottam who goes to Lanka that was made of gold in those days, who says to his younger brother that Api Swarnamai Lanka Name Lakshman Rochate Janani Jan Bhumishcha Swargadapi Gariyasi. Where in this country we considered Ayodhya always more prosperous than Lanka. Because our focus was never on material wealth. It was never on the riches. It was on how that rules or runs with our life. Whether that comes with prosperity, whether that enriches every person. So we do not need an idea of prosperity that is just counted in a GDP or just numbers. Of course they help. But we need to answer that larger call that our Indian ethos call upon us to better understand and better answer and be in the pursuit of. In this country, we have grown up with the story of 5 brothers going on to fight a war and win it against the Kauravas just because they said they were on the side of Dharma, that Bhagwan was on their side. That is a larger message that we get. It is not the might of military alone that makes us strong. It is that path of righteous action. So it is not that Indian ethos will come from somewhere outside, as much as good news flows through this message that we have the greatest of teachings that have flowed through ages in this country. That Swamiji preached upon mankind and that shall continue for thousands of years. We need to remember this fundamental question. And that question is that all these Indian ethos that exist there, are we going to put them into work? Or are we just going to conveniently ignore them when we can? And then when it has to be about claiming them, we blame someone else. Because remember, the unfortunate thing is, the most fortunate thing is that you're born in India. The unfortunate thing is that if you were born in Japan or Germany or the US or somewhere in the Europe, you could have turned towards India for wisdom. Living in India, if you forget it, nobody else can help you. If a badminton player wants to play cricket better, he can go to a cricket player. But if he forgets how to play badminton, the cricket player cannot help you. So it is the Indian teaching, the Indian wisdom, we need to go after it. And remember, none of the Indian teachings, none of India's wisdom can just be acquired just by talking about it. It needs acting upon. That is the reason why it is so important as young people, we answer the larger call of Swamiji. That is the reason why it is important that every day in our day-to-day work and practice, we bring in the understanding and realization of that larger call. So that is largely all that I had to say today, looking at what we must address when we talk about management and Indian ethos. But there's something else that is important as well. The great patriot monk who we celebrate in 2 days' time on his birthday had a very important message, not just for India, but for the rest of the world as well. He said that India's coming glory shall be so great that its ancient glory shall fade in front of it. And skeptics can ask that, oh, Swamiji was practicing whimsical thinking. He was being too optimistic. But there's something else that he says as well. He says that my faith lies in the younger generation, the modern generation. Out of them will come my workers. They will work out this whole problem like lions. And he goes on to talk about, and I'm just adding a few quotations back to back, not adding anything of my own. But these all begin to make sense when you put them one after the other. When he says that education is a manifestation of perfection already within. When he says that each soul is potentially divine. When the patriot monk says that my mission is to preach unto mankind the divinity within and enable it to manifest that divinity in every moment of life. So these things put together, I want to leave it at a very simple stage for you. You know, if you want to look at a much larger problem, you can turn on primetime television at 9 p.m. every single night, and it will tell you everything that has gone wrong with the country. But if you want to do something about it, you need to be reminded of the management of a Vikram Sarabhai on one end that can build India's space program on one side and India's greatest management institutions on the other. You have to be reminded of the education and leadership of a Kalam who goes on to be a Dr. Kalam and a President Kalam, Missile Man Kalam, and stays at ease with a child 5 years old and a Prime Minister 5 years into office. You need to be reminded of the management of an E. Sridharan, who ranging from fixing Pamban at the age of 30, connecting Rameshwaram to mainland India, to building the Konkan railways or the Delhi metro, and finally, a book is written on his life and he's called the Karma Yogi as opposed to the Metro Man. These are endless stories and I have limited time. But the thing is, India's problems have been solved by people who have put their education to use, where management has been realized and used for a higher purpose. And that is the reason why when I said that I'm sharing the stage with two stalwarts, one who embodies and takes forward Indian ethos like very few can, and the other who has taught management and brought it to real life like very few can begin to imagine. The reason why I'm left with the for part, I hope we remember that you can be a for-profit organization or a non-profit organization. Neither gives you the license not to be a for-purpose organization. And just like we need for-purpose organizations, we need for-purpose individuals. And that journey cannot start randomly at the age of 45. That journey cannot start randomly one day in your office room. It needs to be practiced in thought every single day. It needs to be in our chintan and both our thinking and our reflection and realization continuously. That is the reason why in 2 days' time I know there will be social media status updates. There will be pictures of Swami Vivekananda. Quotations, half of them wrong, half of them right. It is important that instead, and I meet a lot of young people across the country who praise Swami Vivekananda a lot. Remember, Swami Vivekananda doesn't need a pat on the back. We need to answer that call. I like to say it that Swami Vivekananda was the savior that India needed. And we need to answer whether he was the savior India deserved, whether we are doing justice to the question, to the larger call that he put forward. So that is the reason why, as young and old, we need to bring everyday problems to our tables as well. The problem of somebody who works at our house as a cook or as a maid or as a staff. If that doesn't find space on our table, then our cursing the rest of the world for its bad management practices doesn't solve the problem. If the problems of a few million children who still work as child laborers, or another few million who are still out of school, doesn't find a place on our table at office room or study table because these problems are too big or too small, that doesn't solve a problem. We need to see that in our limited capacity, whether it is one child or way too many of them, whether it is a very small problem or a much larger problem, whether we want to solve it at a moment's notice or at scale, we need to be reminded by our own fundamental Indian ethos to serve others as we would serve God, to make sure that the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, and finally put our management into use, because I do not want to take any more of your time. I have barely 3 minutes left. But the larger goal was to give you a quick snapshot of my story as well, because I know many of you would have asked, oh, it's not possible. Oh, simple things cannot be scaled. The thing is, if you don't think about scaling in the first place, and you think about a real problem you want to solve, you can go ahead to solve it. And you'll have mentors and gurus and everyone around you to help you do it. The final two things that I do want to add is that I hope one of the other messages you will take is that India doesn't need a China to feel more Indian. That we can claim what is fundamentally ours for the love of it, and not for a war that we want to go on with other ideas. And at the same time, from the same Rig Vedas from where Swamiji brought the great teaching with which an order of monks has continued to lead this country forward, Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitayacha, for the salvation of self and the greater welfare of mankind. From the same Rig Veda comes a great message, that is, Ano Bhadra Kratvo Yantu Vishwata. Let noble thoughts come from all sides. So I hope, as the most Indian of all people, if there is something good outside, that too we shall bring in. But first, let's practice everything that was always good within. Let's not discard that because it has been around for too long. And let's not just begin to be attracted and distracted at the same time because there is something that is coming from a different time zone and a different geolocation. So I hope this is a quick enough, but a putting together of multiple messages in a day. I hope as young, proud citizens of this country, we'll claim everything that is fundamentally ours, from the national motto to mottos that drive our academic institutions, the protectors of this country, and that must drive the citizens. And at the same time, let's draw our attention to problems big and small, everywhere from our house to our local community to the world at large. And let's use Indian ethos for modern management to lift humanity up. And let's continue to answer the question that the 13th president of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission, Swami Ranganathananji Maharaj, who actually inspired the Vivekananda Institute of Human Excellence, I hope we will continue to ask his question every day as we try to answer Swamiji's question. And that is, are we growing spiritually? And for that reason, I'm going to leave today. I'll be in Bhubaneswar tomorrow morning. I'll be missing the National Youth Day program at Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission for the first time, I think, in the last 3 years. But I hope you will bring your friends, your colleagues, your co-workers, your children, your parents, grandparents, whoever it is, to the National Youth Day program. Because I think a reflection, like this discussion, these ideas, they are very, very important, because now we have a new culture of gym going, right? People who are going to gymnasiums, they want to have like 3 friends or 4 friends so that they can stick to those habits. Swamiji asked you to consider the whole world as a gymnasium. I hope you consider the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission in general, the Vivekananda Institute of Human Excellence in particular, as that starting point, and there also bring 4 or 5 friends. Because when you begin to forget those ideas, someone shall bring that up. Someone shall poke an idea. And I hope you'll take up that one idea, make that one idea your life, and go forward and serve people as you would serve God. Thank you so much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.